Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots. Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots. Oh, I already said that. Bootlicker, shills, densely search, peasants, vassals, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. And hope everybody appreciates all the work I did the last 8 months, upgrading my production values and my stage setting here. A lot of hard work went into that, although obviously I still need to talk to my lighting director. In fact, I think I'll fire him. But anyway, let's talk about Yemen. Yeah, man. Um, I've been doing videos about Yemen for quite some time. Previously, I did it because we had another U.S. war that opened up in Yemen. But since then, during the so-called Arab Spring, we had another government that toppled. This time, apparently not prodded by the CIA. And this was a couple of years ago. And now we have this another so-called civil war unleashed. And as we've discussed previously, and I'll attach some of those videos below, but we have a situation in Yemen where it's just a melting pot because now in this vacuum that's been created by this conflict, we have Al Qaeda elements gaining strength, and we have ISIS making their presence known in Yemen as well. But the main focus will be on the fact that we have yet another smoldering heap of a country in the Middle East now, not unlike Libya, and the way countries like Iraq and Syria end up in the same situation in Yemen. We have what was previously more or less a U.S. puppet, who is a strong man, one of the few things that can keep these countries together that have all these colonial borders that keep these tensions going between tribes and religious sectors, and the same situation in Yemen. And so now we have the Houthis who have been waging this war, and of course then the Saudi Arabia intervention in Yemen, which they have done on numerous occasions. But this time it's been mostly a bombing campaign, and we find another country like Libya where the country's flooded with weapons, been provided by all sides, and with a tradition that goes all the way back to the Cold War. And then you remove this artificial power structure by a strong man, and all these elements come to the fore again, and violence is unleashed, and you can't put the genie back in the bottle. So one of the more dramatic events that we have now is last August. Of course, we had Saudi troops that crossed into Yemen briefly, and we've had numerous occasions where Yemeni forces and the Houthis have moved into Saudi Arabia and done border raids, particularly on areas where there's fire coming into Yemen. But this last December, early this month, we had Saudi Arabia actually bombing their own territory to stop Yemeni incursions, because the Yemenis have actually changed their tactic, and the strategy now is to somewhat take the war to Saudi Arabia. And they've captured multiple military bases in 3 different provinces, and they're holding on to this territory. And in one instance, the Houthis inflicted a massive casualties on the coalition forces, so-called coalition forces in Saudi Arabia, including somewhere around 50 Blackwater trained mercenaries, or the former Blackwater, probably XE or whatever they're called now, and then the largest loss of Saudi Arabian troops ever in an incursion. So we have Yemen essentially invading Saudi Arabia, but like some of these other conflicts, this one is not on most people's radar. First of all, it has to do with Saudi Arabia, and the United States is applying support for Saudi Arabia and the so-called coalition that they have in Yemen. But the fact that the U.S. is supposedly not directly involved, or at least on a visible level, it makes it easy to keep this kind of stuff out of the media here in the United States. But I don't think a lot of people would care anyway, unfortunately. And now we have this UN peace plan, these peace talks, which were doomed to failure from the beginning, not including all the big players like Saudi Arabia and some of these tribes. And before the dust had even settled at this this fake meeting. We have Saudi Arabia bombing the shit out of Yemen yet again, and hostilities resume. So it's going to be another one of those situations where it will just continue. Probably like the Ukraine, and Ukraine is another example of another conflict that continues to go on more or less, but it's just not in the spotlight now because there's other things going on, and that's when more and more things happen. And in fact, we have other things that have been going on that are actually pretty notable, and that's what I want to talk about. Bring back that Saudi Arabia now has this Gulf Cooperation Council, which is going to be this coalition that they will use to apply force in whatever areas they think their foreign policy needs to be. In this case, Yemen. So we have Saudi Arabian special forces. We have operating in Yemen. We have United Arab Emirates forces. We have Qatar with 1,000 troops there. And interestingly enough, in a lot of situations, they are allying themselves with Al Qaeda in Yemen. No surprise there, which makes the situation in Yemen all the more complicated. And who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? And if that weren't enough, we have Latin mercenaries. This was one of the more interesting stories to me that came out of Yemen, is that this is the result of a 2010 program by XE, and supposedly they've trained thousands. They have 1,400 in training now, and they've actually sent 450, between 450 and 800 of these mercenaries to Yemen, and they are arranged through the United Arab Emirates, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this is not all set up by U.S. spooks and the CIA and U.S. military, U.S. private contractors, because that's who it's running through. And it's all the usual people that the United States likes to use elsewhere, as well as in their home countries in Latin America. So it's troops from Colombia, Panama, Mexico, Salvador, and Chile. Colombia being a notable U.S. connection because the United States has had a close military relationship with Colombia for many, many, many years. People don't know that they are one of the only Latin American countries to send 5,000 troops, even to fight in the Korean War. And the U.S. has close ties with a very large military, 450,000 troops in Colombia. So the fact that we're seeing Colombian mercenaries show up is no surprise for a number of reasons. The connection with these private contractors and connection with the United States as well. And this is how rich states and corporations can wage wars without having to rely on these peasant armies and citizens. And as I've discussed in many videos before, we're going to see more and more of these private armies. And Saudi Arabia also has done the same, and in fact they've hired troops from Eritrea and Sudan, just straight out mercenaries. And a lot of these this peasant army and these mercenaries that Saudi Arabia has in the field are not very effective, and is one of the reasons why Saudi Arabia has to rely on air power. And Saudi Arabia recently bought another $1.29 billion of weapons from the United States, so this is directly going into the Yemen war, well, with little doubt, although a lot of it could end up in the hands of either or ISIS and or Al Qaeda. And this also ties in with the previous video I just did on global arms sales surging. So all these countries are expending a lot of hardware, and they're going to need to replace it. So and in fact, it's interesting, the United Arab Emirates is offering quite the benefits to these mercenaries. You can get UAE citizenship, free university for your kids, and a pension. So they can sweeten the pot, but they got plenty of money to do it with. So so this situation in Yemen, so far there's been 2,355 civilians killed, 6,000 people dead, and 365,000 displaced. But it's a country of, I think, 7 million or 8 million, something like that. So it's a fairly small country, but interesting to see the situation where Yemen used to have a strongman and a puppet government of the U.S., or at least a vassal state, and Yemen was a partner in the so-called war on terror, and now we have just another quagmire and a humanitarian crisis in Saudi Arabia flexing their regional muscle. And I want to point out as well that no one ever really talks about this fabled and non-existent Iran connection in Yemen. And that's good to see all that die down. It's just another clusterfuck that one way or another is a result of post-colonialism and regional interventions and all these timeless, unending ethnic rivalries. And so for that reason, of course, this ceasefire is going to fail. It never was serious. The carnage will go on, and we seem to be adjusting to a world where places like Libya, this can go on for months and years, and could end up turning into decades. And we're seeing that trail in Iraq and Syria as this whole world is dismantled, as it historically has to, I suppose. But another smoldering heap in the Middle East, and something to keep our eye on, because one never knows what major geopolitical shifts will happen from as a result of some of these regional conflicts. But here we go. Yet again, the war on terror ends up producing yet another haven for all these jihadist groups, ISIS, Al Qaeda, etc., and a playground for all these regional operatives to wreak their havoc. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.